Hello guys, I hope you're doing well. Today the Russian Foreign Minister Sergey Lavrov paid an official visit to the UAE and he held a press conference with the Emirati counterpart, Abdullah bin Zayed, who said during the press conference that there must be areas that open ways of joint action with Syria. However, the Emirati minister assured that the unilateral coercive measures, he means the sanctions imposed by the US on Syria, known as the Caesar Act, is complicating the return of Syria to its rightful Arabs surrounding the Arab League. Bin Zayed went further, saying that the return of Syria to the Arab League is in the interest of Syria and other countries of the region. So I'm going to divide this episode into a few parts. First of all, the timing of the visit, in my opinion, is very important, and it comes at a time or in a new phase in the region and in the world where Joe Biden is ascending to power and there is a new administration in the United States. And as we may know, under Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton and Biden administration, these three politicians, they preferred the Muslim Brotherhood organization in the Middle East to ascend to power in the Arabic nations, especially after the so-called Arab Spring. And this agenda of the United States was disliked by the Emiratis and by the Saudis. Therefore, they supported a coup d'etat in Egypt, for example, in order to oust the former president of Egypt, Morsi. And the military has taken over the country, and then Sisi became a president. So now Biden comes to power again, and it's clear that he's trying to launch a campaign, for example, against Mohammed bin Salman of Saudi Arabia. He's the crown prince, in order for him not to become a king in the future, and he has a preference for the Muslim Brotherhood powers in the region, and who are the countries who support the Muslim Brotherhood in the region are mainly Qatar and Turkey. So if you monitor the social media accounts, you will see the Emirati and Saudi influencers are joining their efforts to let's say, criticize Joe Biden and try to raise the issue of Saudi Arabia from a foreign interference angle, which is true in my opinion. And look, I criticized Saudi Arabia in the last 10 years for supporting militant groups in Syria, terrorist groups such as Jaish al-Islam. Saudi Arabia stopped supporting this group in 2018, and therefore the group has been dissolved in eastern Ghouta, and they rushed into or escaped into northern Syria, and now they're embraced by Turkey. However, don't expect me to celebrate American intervention in Saudi Arabia. I am consistent in my opinion and in my political positions, and I would never celebrate foreign intervention, especially from the United States, in the affairs of any Arab or non-Arab countries. So the timing of this visit is very important for the United Arab Emirates to diversify its relations, especially when it comes to defense and security, because the Americans are not a reliable partner and they could push you under the wagon at any time. So you need to have an alternative growing superpower in your back and to have better relations, not only economically and trade, but also on a security level. And I can't stress enough the importance of diversifying the relations of these Arab monarchies with China and Russia, and keep their relations with the United States. I'm not telling them to cut their relations, but heavily relying on the United States will sooner or later lead to negative consequences on their own society and on their political sphere. So if we go back to the second point, is the position of the UAE towards Syria after 2011. Of course, the UAE didn't support the terrorist groups in Syria. They didn't fund them. They didn't send jihadists. They didn't give them political cover. And however, they closed their embassy in 2012 because the Arab League has, at that time, was mainly Qatar was leading the Arab League, and they practiced huge pressure on the Arab countries in order to expel Syria from the Arab League. But the Emiratis reopened their embassy in Syria in late 2018. So there is already diplomatic relations between both sides. But what are the mutual grounds or mutual interests between Syria and the United Arab Emirates? First of all is combating the Muslim Brotherhood. The Muslim Brotherhood is an existential threat to Syria and to the United Arab Emirates and to Saudi Arabia and to Egypt, to Libya, to many Arab countries, because its affiliation is to Turkey. And they are an organization that rely heavily on soft penetration of the societies in order to gain the hearts and the minds of the people through indoctrination, through brainwashing, through using religion, political Islam, in order to mobilize the people against any ruling government or ruling elite, in order to install a government that is a puppet for Qatar and Turkey. So the Muslim Brotherhood issue is very important for both Syria and the UAE. The second mutual ground is combating Erdogan's expansionism, and I can't stress enough on this point, like why Erdogan is more dangerous than Israel. And I would say that in every episode, if it's necessary. Israel is occupying Arab territories. For example, in '67, they occupy the Golan Heights, and they are not able to exert authority or exert power on this region except through military means, and that's not enough for any occupation power for sustainable occupation, because you need also to gain the hearts and the minds of the people, and Israel is not able to do that in the Golan Heights or elsewhere in Lebanon or in Palestine. But Turkey can do that, because Turkey shares similar religion, the same religion actually, and similar culture. And people have been watching in the last 10 to 15 years a lot of Turkish movies and Turkish series, and they are impressed by the Turkish culture. And the proof of that is Northern Cyprus, Liwa Skandaron or Skandaron area, which is called now Hatay, in Jarablos, in Afrin. Wherever Turkey goes, they are able to occupy first militarily, but then they are able to gain the hearts and the minds of the people through soft penetration or indoctrination, let's say, Turkification. They're able to Turkify the people, unlike Israel, which is not able to Judaize the people, for example. So Erdogan's expansionism is an existential threat to Syria, an existential threat to the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia, because during the era of the Ottoman Empire, when at the first years when Ottoman Empire started to expand in the Middle East and North Africa, and they did that through Syria. That's why they called Syria Sham Sharif, or the Honorable Levant, because Syria was their key or the gate to invade and occupy most of the countries in Middle East and North Africa. And the biggest mistake that Saudi Arabia has committed in the last 10 years is by allying with Turkey at the first 2 or 3 years of the so-called Syrian revolution. And they had a joint military offices in Turkey, in southern Turkey, in order to lead the operations against Syria. And now what happened? Turkey is gaining influence, Turkey is expanding in Syria, Turkey is expanding in Iraq, Turkey is expanding in southern Caucasus, is threatening Greece, is threatening the rest of Cyprus. So this Frankenstein of Erdogan is growing because of also miscalculations from Saudi Arabia. But now Saudi Arabia and the Emirates, they know this threat well, so they also need to cooperate with Syria in this regard. So security arrangements, security cooperation is very important to oppose or face the Erdogan's expansionism. The third mutual ground is to circumvent the sanctions, especially when the Emirates send medical aid or humanitarian aid. At the beginning of the corona crisis, the Emirati side the leader of the Emirates called President Bashar al-Assad, and they sent medical aid, which is something that is still forbidden for Syria to import, regardless of what they tell you in the media. They say, no, medicine and food and stuff are not in the sanctions, they're exempt from the sanctions. That's bullshit, because the Americans are imposing harsh sanctions on the Syrian central bank and on any transaction systems that operates in Syria and outside Syria who try to send money into Syria. So if you can't make transactions, if you can't buy stuff from Syria, then of course you're also banning Syrians from buying medicine and from buying food. But the United Arab Emirates sent aid in the last few months to Syria, which is a good thing. The other thing is Emirati role in mediation, or to play a mediator role between Syria and Saudi Arabia. Of course, Syria and Saudi Arabia had a very hostile position towards each other in the last decade, in the last 10 years. However, with the growing threat of Turkey in the region, both sides found themselves to have a mutual enemy. So this could be an opportunity for both sides to reconcile and focus on the bigger threat to the region, which is Turkey. And at the same time, I need to mention this, which is very important. Syria is able to have a very good relation, strategic partnership with Iran and Russia, at the same time to have a good relations with Saudi Arabia. But Saudis should not expect from Syria to cut its relations with Iran. That's not going to happen, because Syria knows that it's a small country and it's been targeted since decades, and they are trying to overthrow Syria and its ruling elite since decades. So of course, Syria will keep its relations with Iran and with Russia, and those countries rushed to Syria to fight alongside the Syrian army against the terrorist organizations, unlike other Arab countries who exported terrorism to Syria. So don't expect from Syria to cut its relations to Iran. It's a strategic partnership and it's made on solid security basis. But at the same time, there is nothing wrong in having a good relations with the neighborhood, especially Saudi Arabia and the Emirates. These two countries have a strong financial base and they're able to help Syria in reconstruction, but they need first to also diversify their relations with Russia and China in addition to the United States, and not to heavily rely on the United States, because the Americans are now playing a role of a bulldog in the region, and they're threatening anyone and everyone who is trying to restore its relations with Damascus, and they're even running after tankers in the Mediterranean in order to stop the fuel shipments to Syria. Just today, the Ministry of Energy in Syria declared that we have a 20% shortage of fuel, which is becoming up or over the 50% of the shortage that we already had because of the American occupation of the oil and gas fields of Syria. So Syrians already had 50% less, and now we have 20% again less, because they bought fuel, it seems, from Iran or from the United States, but it took them time to bring this fuel to Syria and to circumvent also the sanctions of the Americans. So imagine that if you had, let's say, 100 liters of oil dedicated to you, let's say, per week or per month, now you have 20 liter, so 80% less. And all this is happening due to the sanctions. They're suffocating the Syrian people. They're pushing them on the brink of poverty and starvation. And at the same time, they're saying, we are doing this to protect the Syrian people. Oh, so good-hearted Americans. You can't imagine how good-hearted they are. Anyways, the other point is reconstruction. Syria can benefit from the Emirates in reconstruction effort. As I mentioned, they have a strong financial base. They can invest in Syria, but at the same time, they have an expertise in turning their country into a modern state. And if we go back decades ago, it was an ashes. It was a desert in the Emirates. So you can use these in addition to trade partnership. However, the outstanding issues between the both sides could be resolved. For example, the Yemeni issue, Syrians do not agree with the Emirates and Saudi Arabia of what they are doing in Yemen, and they don't agree with them on normalizing the relations with Israel, especially the Emiratis. For Syria, there is no way possible for them to sign on any kind of agreement with Israel unless Israel withdraws fully from the occupied Golan Heights and promises a state for the Palestinians. This is the minimum, So, I mean, in my opinion, Emiratis do not intervene in this case between Syria and the Israelis. And the Emiratis, I mean, in the last decades, in the Arab-Israeli conflict, they didn't play an essential role. Saudi Arabia played some role in 73 war. They stopped the fuel export in 73 war, and the prices skyrocketed. But now they can't even play that game, even if they wanted to, because America, United States is now self-sufficient of oil, so they don't need oil from Saudi Arabia. So these were the main mutual grounds and disagreements between Syria and the United Arab Emirates. In my opinion, it's important for Syria to have better relations especially with the Emirates, and to try maybe to reconcile with Saudi Arabia, because the entire region is facing an existential threat from Turkey, especially Erdogan. But if Erdogan is being sidelined in the next elections, or he loses the elections, then that would be also a chance for Syria to reconcile with the new ruling elite in Turkey, because Syria doesn't have any interest in having an hostile relations with its entire neighborhood. It's been Syria was fought in the last 10 years by a lot of countries in the region, not the other way around. So Syria needs good relations with the new leadership in Turkey after Erdogan, and needs good relations with the entire neighborhood for trade and businesses and politics and cultural relations, and on every aspect and every level. So I don't know what's your opinion about this. Do you support better relations between Syria and the United Arab Emirates? And if yes, why? And if no, why? I want legitimate answers, and I want you to give your best analysis based on realistic approach, not on emotional approaches. I want to read your opinions, and let's see if we can discuss this issue again in the next video. I've been your host, Kevork Almasyan of Syriana Analysis. If you're new on my channel and you like my content, please subscribe. It really helps me, and share it with your friends on social media platforms. And if you like to support my independent work, you can become my patron. All the links in the description below. And see you next time.